Most people believe that the only investment-worthy watches out there have to be expensive, and that all other watches that you could buy at retail brand new are going to lose a significant portion of their value on the pre-owned market. But is this actually true? Just because a watch is affordable or sits at an affordable price point doesn't mean that it can't appreciate in value over time. And in this video, we explore 3 different watches at the sub $1,000 price point, all from Seiko, that have done just that. Watch Charts can help you find your next watch at a great price. You can easily browse private listings from across the web, research market prices for thousands of watch models, and a lot more. Check out our research tools at watchcharts.com. The first of the 3 watches that we're going to talk about is the Seiko Alpinist, the SARB017. This had a retail price of $440 and was discontinued in the spring of 2018 after 11 years on the market. I mention that because it probably is not a watch that's constrained on the supply side because of its extended production run. The upward trend in the market average price, though, started around the same time as this discontinuation was announced. And currently this watch is sitting at over $750 in the market average price. The sales volume throughout 2021 remained more or less consistent month over month, but in the new year it has slightly dropped. But otherwise, the watch itself, continues to command pretty decent interest. Overall, it's seen a cumulative gain of 123% in 5 years. So what would explain why this watch has seen such an appreciation in value? There's a few possible reasons why. The first is that even though it was discontinued, Seiko did announce a successor to this watch, but what collectors in particular didn't like as much about the newer version is the Prospex branding that now is included and printed on the dial. The older version, this one, the SARB017, has plainer text on the dial, and for that reason alone is just slightly more desirable. It's a very classic watch and remains a bit of a cult classic, and even for people who are not necessarily collectors, this could be your one watch collection, and you don't really need to buy another watch after that. So those reasons kind of collectively explain why it continues to command as much interest as it does in the market, and why the price has appreciated as much as it has over time. The second watch we're going to talk about is also an Alpinist, but this time a different variation. It's the SPB089, the Blue Alpinist. This watch had a retail price of $600. It was a limited edition that Seiko collaborated on with Hodinkee, and was released in only 1,959 pieces in February 2019. It's currently all sold out. You can't buy one brand new. Its market average price today is a little over $1,300, which is slightly lower than the all-time high of late 2021. But sales volume throughout 2021 and into the new year has remained on a month-over-month basis below 10 units. Its market average, of course, now is more than double its retail price. And in terms of what explains that appreciation over time, everything that we talked about in terms of the cult collection status of the original Seiko Alpinist also applies in this case. It is to a very large degree more or less the same watch. It does have the blue dial, and it comes on a bracelet, but those are kind of factored into the retail price, the higher retail price relatively. But because this is also a limited edition, and that's reflected in the drastically lower sales volume, it helps explain why this watch has appreciated as much as it has. One other interesting observation about this piece in particular is that soon after it was announced, the price shot up, and shortly after shooting up actually crashed, and we speculate that might have been in response to the backlash from the collector community and the enthusiast community on online watch collecting forums. But then there was a second crash later in the year after prices started creeping back up. And the second crash actually seems to have happened because the amount of watches that were available to buy on the pre-owned market seemed to have more than tripled in that part of the year, which caused the price to crater. Since then, however, as sales volume has stayed low, the number of listings showing up has stayed minute. The value of the watch on the pre-owned market has only continued to rise. That leaves us with the third watch we're going to talk about, which is the SRP 313, the second generation Black Monster. And this had a retail price of, believe it or not, lower than the previous two watches we just covered, $279. It was launched in 2012, but has since been succeeded by newer generation monsters. And because there have been so many different variations, this one likely are more similar to the Blue Alpinist than the original Alpinist. Also likely saw a very low volume production. This watch can be had on the pre-owned market today for a market average price of $700 and sees very low sales volume. In fact, we haven't seen any listed on any forums since November 2021. And when we look at the cumulative gain in value for this watch over the last 5 years, that number is a mind-boggling 185%, which very much puts it in terms of relative appreciation, the same category as watches that cost way more at retail. In terms of what explains that rise, the Monster is definitely a cult classic, maybe even more of a cult classic than the Alpinists. It has a very, very distinct look. And because there are so many different variations of these, if you're a collector who's into that kind of thing, then you're going to be basically competing with maybe just a handful of other people to try and find one of these, but the the supply for this watch, as it were, is so limited that sellers can demand higher prices. Now that we've covered the three watches, let's talk about some higher level observations that apply more generally across these three references certainly, but then also explain some others that we haven't covered in this video. One of the measures that's available on watch charts as part of our analytics is a measure of volatility, which is essentially just a measure of the spread that we see in market prices. And in all three instances, volatility sits around 20% for these watches, which is considerably higher than watches, even from Seiko, like the, let's say, SPB 143, that's the higher sales volume and correspondingly much lower volatility in their market average price. We speculate that the lower price point at which you are looking at a given watch, the more pronounced the delta is expected to be between what dealers will charge for a watch and what private sellers will charge for the exact same watch. And this kind of intuitively makes sense. For the same watch, dealers are likelier to want a bit more of a margin, whereas when you think about enthusiasts, especially enthusiasts that sit at or around or below the $1,000 price point, these people are not necessarily going to be motivated by money for the watches that they're buying and selling. The average sale price on Reddit, Watch Exchange subreddit, the Watch You Seek forum, just as an example, is around $1,000. So this is where kind of the heart of the collector and enthusiast community lives. It's where I do personally some of my own collecting, and so generally watches that are being bought and sold at this price point, you're not necessarily looking to make a buck. And so for that reason alone, for the same watch, you might find dealers charging more. And so that then gets reflected in the volatility because when we compute the market average, we're not differentiating between listings that are coming up from dealers or from private sellers. And then, this is generally applicable to Seikos in the sub $1,000 category, kind of in a more general sense and not just applicable to these three references. The second kind of high-level observation is that we included references to the retail prices in this video because we want to provide some sort of baseline for reference to talk about appreciation. But the thing to remember about Seiko watches, certainly in this price category, is that they tend to sometimes be discounted below retail. So if you account for that, then the appreciation that all of these watches have seen is even more astounding. The third observation is that because of that distinction between the premium that you're going to have to pay by buying one of these watches from a dealer as opposed to buying from a private party, means that all else being equal, buyers would probably be better off at this price point and for these watches buying from private parties as opposed to buying through a dealer. You're likely to get better value for money. So in terms of takeaways, generally speaking, while it is certainly true that both in absolute terms as well as relative terms, more expensive watches do outperform more affordable watches, it is not true that watches at more affordable price points or lower price points cannot see appreciation that in relative terms is comparable to watches at more expensive price points. Just as a whole, that more affordable watches cannot appreciate. In fact, when you look at the price indexes, and I would encourage viewers to go check them out on our website, what you will see is that even at lower price points, watches in the aggregate do seem to appreciate over time. Maybe in relative terms, generally speaking, not as much as watches at more expensive price points, but the appreciation is there. And then, of course, when we get into more specific examples, like some of the ones that we discussed in more detail in this video, you're seeing appreciation that is comparable to watches that are way more expensive. So, what about you? Do you have an affordable watch from Seiko or from someone else that has also appreciated in value over a similar kind of time frame? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.